What's up, guys? It's your boy Zowoki back out with some more of the Chris Watts and Nichol Kessinger's videos. Again, we are going back to Unapologetically Me True Crime, a great YouTube channel that you guys should watch. Links are in the description. Make sure you guys go give her some love. Subscribe, comment, like, and share. This woman is almost to 10,000 subscribers. So if you're watching, make sure you guys go over to her channel and subscribe. But we are going to be watching her part 2 of the Watts family annihilation. Definitely very thorough, and you guys have been mentioning that there's stuff in here that I don't even know, so that's why we're watching this. So grab a chair, get comfortable. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel by hitting that white bro icon down the bottom right. Hit that bell icon next to it, so when I do post videos like this one, you guys will get that little ring notification that I've posted that video, and then you guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, I'm so thankful for all of you guys. Hopefully one day we'll hit that 100K goal, but I need your guys' help. And then, like I said before, go over to Unapologetically Me True Crime. Hopefully I can do a collaboration with her and we can talk Watts crime. But until that time, let's get into this video. All right, so this video is 2 hours long. This part 2 is going to be split up into 2 parts for myself. I don't like to go necessarily over more than an hour. So just let me know if you guys enjoy the 1 hour's increments, or if you guys want longer. I've never really made 2 hour long videos. I made 1 or 2 of them, but let me know down in the comments. Let's get into it.
Sometimes when you have children and your relationship starts to deteriorate, a child could help repair it.
It's pretty sad that him doing this was pretty much foreshadowing what he was going to do to his wife in the future and kids.
Sometimes people, when the relationship starts to dissolve, repair is not an option and they want to get away and start new.
He prepared this video for a college class, and this was 6 months before he married Shanann. He was already doing relationship dissolution research. I don't know that he ever really loved her. I think that he was just doing what society and his family and Shanann expected, and he felt like he was on a runaway train.
How can a normal young man, and he's normal, he was normal, but he wasn't evaluated when he came into the system. He wasn't normal if he did this. How did this happen? How did this happen?
Lust.
And I go back in my mind thinking, was there something I didn't pick up with on Chris? But I can't think of anything except he was quiet.
Lust, money.
Have you reconciled the idea that he could have done all of this?
Yes. And
I
that
don't think she has.
scares me to death. It scares me to death to think that he could have done all of this. I don't see why he's pleading guilty.
Because he did it.
But then you ask yourself, would a normal person put dispose of the body the way he did?
But it could be somebody else. NK. She had the background. She had where she stabbed somebody in the back. She's got hookups with daddy stuff. And Chris was that silent, quiet guy. But maybe that she, NK, rubbed some of that off on him. And then that's how he started to do all this stuff. The murders and so forth. So the big influence, and I always say this, 90 to 95%, it was NK's fault. Chris Watts and Nichol Kessinger's Deep Dive, Part 2.
good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is part 2 of a multi-part series on the Chris Watts case, focusing more on the relationship between Chris and Nichol Kessinger and whether or not she should be held accountable for anything. So if you haven't seen part 1, you can find the link in the description box below. There is also a playlist I created that I will be adding to throughout this series. So I would suggest that you subscribe and to hit that notification bell so that you're notified whenever I put a new video out. While I was editing part 1, I decided to order the book Letters from Christopher by Sherilyn Cadle. The reason that I chose that book over any of the other books that are out there is because that's the only book that Christopher Watts collaborated on. Allegedly, this book contains as much of the whole truth that we're ever going to get. But even this book, however, doesn't contain the whole entire truth. No. For one, this is only Chris's truth, not Shanann's truth. She will never be able to tell us her side of the story. But thanks to text messages off of her phone, we do have a lot of her story, but we don't have her side of...
She tried so hard to fight for her marriage. Like the letters, the things that she said about him. I mean, look, how happy Father's Day. You're incredibly awesome. Like, come on.
The murder and what really happened that morning of August 13th, 2018. Chris also made it abundantly clear that there are pieces of his story that will never be told by him. He will take it to his grave. There is still so much to speculate on, especially after reading this book. I read it in 2 days, and I think that what is said within that book is very relevant to this series. So in part 2, that's what we're going to talk about. It wasn't planned, but it's happening because it's about as close as we can get to Chris's side. But again, remember, we are never going to know the whole truth. Even Chris admits this. Now, I'm not very big on scripture. While I am Catholic, and I even went to Catholic school as a kid and participated at church every Sunday growing up, as I got older, I moved more into my own spirituality and relationship with God, as opposed to the strict Catholic ways that I was brought up with. And the reason that I bring this up is because since being in prison, Chris Watts has become very spiritual and very close to God. This is in part because the first and only book he was able to read in jail while awaiting sentencing was the Bible. He read it in 2 weeks, and now he often quotes scripture, whether in conversation or in letters and correspondence with other people. And one of the Bible verses that Chris told Sherilyn Cadle to read was in regards to Nichol, whom he refers to as Nikki. He told Sherilyn that if she reads Proverbs 7 verses 5 through 27, that's Nikki. And I'm going to read those verses to you because it sums up how he feels about Nichol Kessinger. And it also summed up my speculations.
And he recently kind of exploited her as his Jezebel
as well. So it's Proverbs 7, 5 through 27. These verses in the Bible show a very sexual woman who is married but doesn't seem to care about the sacred bond of marriage at all. Now, I'm not sure which edition of the Bible he was reading from. This is the New International Version of Proverbs 7, 5 through 27, but it's basically about adultery. So here it is. They will keep you from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman with her seductive words. At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. I saw among the simple. I noticed among the young men a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house at twilight as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She is unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner, she lurks. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face, she said, "Today I fulfilled my vows. and I have food from my fellowship offering at home. So I came out to meet you. I looked for you, and I have found you. I have covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. All at once he followed her, like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. My opinion? In this Bible verse, the woman is the one who is married, but the sentiment is the same. There is no value to marriage in the woman's mind. She knows that it's wrong. She tries to hide her indiscretions while her husband is out of town, but she doesn't care. She knows what she wants, and she goes after it. She doesn't think of the boy much either. It's not about him. It's all about her and her needs, wants, and desires. It's about lust. The woman has been known to do this to others, and the warning is clear. Do not follow her. Do not get caught in her web, for if you do, you will certainly be devoured. Her intentions are not pure. They are selfish and cruel, and no good will come of a relationship.
All that woman wanted was booty. Literally, booty.
With her. What do you guys think? When it comes to the relationship between...
She paid for nothing. Chris paid for everything when it came to dating and stuff like that. I mean, there are the male traditions where you want to wine and dine a female and so forth like that, but there are some females that like to help pay and so forth. But Nichol didn't care. She wanted all the attention on herself. She wanted Chris to do this for her, Chris to do that for her. She didn't want to be the secondary. She wanted to be the solo, the main squeeze. She didn't like that Chris had a lot of firsts with Shanann. She didn't like that. But what did she want? She wanted the booty.
Between Chris Watts and Nichol Kessinger, I think what we can all agree on is that they appeared to get very close very fast. In part one, I talked about who Nichol Kessinger was before Chris Watts. And while we, again, won't know the whole truth about Nichol Kessinger, there is evidence that she lied to law enforcement in regards to the seriousness of her relationship with Chris. She intentionally deleted things, text messages in particular, and she also admitted to telling Chris and her good friend Charlotte, whom was the only friend she says she talked to about Chris, to do the same. She intentionally misled investigators at every turn, and she was very good at manipulating her own questioning, steering the conversation away from the truth quite consistently and without any interference or pushback from Detective Kobach. It was extremely hard for me to follow her interviews because she would go off on these tangents, kind of like what I end up doing sometimes. She would go off on these tangents, and it's like she'd be asked a question, she doesn't answer that question, and then all of a sudden the topic is completely changed. And it takes sometimes 20 or 30 minutes for Detective Kobach to bring her back to the original question that was asked. It's my opinion that Detective Kobach became biased towards Nichol Kessinger, be it from her manipulations or something else. But I believe that very early on, Detective Kobach stopped being objective, if he even ever was. He became friendly with Nichol, and it was more about keeping a relationship.
I think he became infatuated with her. Like, who knows? She probably did some of that witchy-poo voodoo stuff that she was doing with crystals and all that stuff. Chris even said it downstairs in the basement. He said she was doing some weird stuff down in the basement with her friends. I mean, can we believe the word that he says? No, because the man's a complete liar. But, I mean, why would you make that stuff up? About talking about your mistress and their cloaks and weird stuff in the basement.
Of good cop with Nikki rather than calling out all of her bullshit inconsistencies.
There was no
We're
bad
going to get
cop.
into those inconsistencies in
Yes,
part
please.
3 though, as well as text exchanges. Again, this is going to be a very long and very detailed series. So if you're liking it so far and you're interested, please, of course, hit the like button, but also make sure you hit the notification bell after you subscribe, because that's how you're going to get a notification when these videos come out. And speaking of inconsistencies, I know my uploads are somewhat inconsistent. It's all about how long it takes me to fact check, compile, edit, script. It's a lot. It's a lot for me. But anyway, let's keep going here. I think that it's important to talk about the type of boy that Christopher Watts was in his early years in order to gain some perspective into how he thought, how his mind worked. The Watts family was not a wealthy family. They weren't poor, but they definitely had to work hard for what they had. When Chris was born, Ronnie and Cindy didn't have maternity insurance, and Cindy stated that it took them 18 months just to pay for his birth. Chris also had a sister named Jamie who was 7 years old at the time Chris was born. Jamie was very excited to welcome her little brother into the family, and they grew up very close, and they are still close to this day. Another side note here, we'll be getting into the Watts family more later on in the series. Chris was more of his father's son. He absolutely adored his father and looked up to him. They bonded over cars and trips to places like Bristol, Tennessee, and Daytona, Florida. Chris was described as a happy child and was always very respectful. He was also an introvert. Christopher has never been openly affectionate or emotional. We saw this for ourselves and speculated about how he could be so unattached emotionally when his family was missing. Even after he confessed and throughout his sentencing, there was hardly any emotion shown. But according to him and his family,
the only emotion this man ever showed was when his mom was speaking.
He was always that way. He got good grades in school. He loved sports. He never got into any trouble, and his father, Ronnie, coached his little league teams. His family was modest, but his family life was better than most. He was also very close with his grandmother. She was a German woman who was not very affectionate, but she loved Christopher deeply and taught him many things about life. He spent a lot of time with her while his mother was at work because she was the one who watched after him. In his teen years, Chris never dated. He was very socially awkward. He had 2 good friends growing up, and he never really ventured out from those 2 friends. In fact, they are still friends today, and these friends were very hurt by this tragedy. They were unable to believe that Christopher could do something like this. But while his other friends would go to parties and dances, Chris would stay home and watch television with his parents. He never drank or did drugs, and he got along with everyone. According to his mother, Cindy, he was too perfect of a teenager to be true. Christopher went to a Baptist church when he was growing up, and the teachings of this religion had him fearing that he would go to hell if he died while sinning. He seemed to take religion very seriously. His religion taught him that he could not drink, go to dances, or have sex before marriage. Christopher says he was afraid of God and put him, quote, in a box, unquote. Christopher felt that if he did anything to displease God, he could go to hell. But as long as he obeyed all of the rules and didn't sin, God would be pleased with him. Cindy recalled hearing
So then why did it come out of nowhere that he decided to sleep with this Jezebel?
Christopher in the bathroom, repenting over and over to God for sins he felt he had committed, and said she never knew what those things were, but that he repeated himself in an OCD manner. After Chris graduated high school, he went to a NASCAR technical school. His dream was to work on car engines for NASCAR. However, he never managed to get on the circuit. He was always a hard worker. He was very proud of his accomplishments. Back then, money went a lot further than it does now, and at that time, he was bringing in about $2,500 a month, and he began saving money for his future, which he looked forward to. He wanted to get married and have children of his own. He had his own apartment, good credit, he was good with money, and he was always responsible with his bills. As an adult, he really didn't date much either. He says it isn't that he didn't like girls, because he says that he did. He was just extremely shy. When his cousin told him about Shanann, he wasn't very interested at first until he looked her up and saw her picture on Facebook. He was blown away. To him, she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. So he sent her a friend request, which she did not accept at first. But Chris's cousin was Shanann's friend and told Shanann what a nice guy Chris really was. So Shanann accepted his request and they became friends, and eventually they decided to meet. They hit it off, they dated for a couple of years before deciding to get married. Chris arranged for both sides of their families to be together at the beach when he proposed to Shanann. It was said to be very romantic, the ring was big and beautiful, and the two made a beautiful couple. They were married in November of 2012. Now we know Shanann was a very public person, and eventually she was live on Facebook and social media many times throughout the day. Christopher says this was an area of stress for him. He did not want to be on camera, and many times Shanann would put him there spontaneously.
You know, when she speaks, like when she's mentioning that Shanann or Chris didn't want to be on camera, my fiance doesn't want to be on camera very much. She definitely doesn't like to be there. I don't force her. I don't make her, hey, get over here and do this, whatever. So, and my fiance kind of expressed her like, can I not be on camera all the time and stuff like that? And I was like, yeah, no problem, whatever. And that's the problem Chris had, is big time was the communication problem. And he just kept things to himself, and it didn't really help him.
While she loved being in front of people and in front of the camera, Chris, again, was an introvert, and he didn't like the attention. Shanann did portray them as a perfect, happy family, and would often brag about how lucky she and the girls were to have Christopher. But the reality of the situation was much different. They had some pretty hefty financial issues, and while they both made a decent living, their debt had become a huge problem. Aside from medical debt, Shanann would often plan large parties in order to promote her business, where she would spend hundreds of dollars on one dinner party. According to Chris, it was very important to Shanann to appear well off. To Shanann, appearances were everything, and it's part of why they bought.
But that still doesn't conclude you to commit murder.
That huge house that they ended up not really being able to afford. Whenever these parties would take place, Chris would stay upstairs and entertain whatever children were there. That was his place, but he says he didn't mind much because
that's what I would have done. I would have had more fun playing with the kids and stuff, with the cars and all, and playing dress up and stuff like that. It's like, I'd rather hang out with the kids.
He preferred to stay in the background anyway. And according to him, trying to keep up an appearance was kind of embarrassing for him.
They're more
Christopher
fun.
had become background noise. He was often brushed off or ignored by Shanann. Whether or not she realized how hurtful this was to Chris, we will never know. I personally don't think she was aware of how bad things were until North Carolina. And in her defense, she immediately started to change and was desperate to work things out and to fix their marriage. On June 22nd of 2018, Chris and Shanann went on a trip to San Diego with Thrive. It was right before this trip that Chris and Nicole Kessinger started to take the bit of flirting that they had been doing to the next level. Chris refers to Nichol as Nikki because she goes by Nikki. So Chris and Nikki actually made plans to meet up after Chris returned home from his trip to San Diego, which he says he didn't even want to take. This is the video that Shanann posted of them the day that they had arrived in San Diego, and you can see Christopher is trying to stay out of the way of the camera, and he didn't really appear to be happy to be there.
Hey guys, we're here from the boat today.
On June 26th, Shanann took the girls later that afternoon with her dad for a 5-week family visit to North Carolina. Chris would say he actually did not want her to go, but he never told her that he didn't want her to go. He eventually ended up joining them a month later for a week-long family vacation. Chris says that if Shanann had not gone on that trip, he doesn't think he would have had an affair, and none of this would have ever happened.
So still blame Shanann. Like, Can you not take any responsibility for what you did?
He says that if Shanann had been home, he probably wouldn't have ever met up with Nikki at the park that day where everything began, or ever went out with her at all. But Shanann had no idea of what was going on. And again, Chris never told her to stay home. Shanann could never have known that that family trip would set up the perfect opportunity for an affair to blossom between her husband and a coworker. It was just before that trip that Christopher learned of Shanann's pregnancy. In this video that Shanann posted online, you can see he is not as excited as you would think he should be, finding out that she's pregnant with their third child.
That's just a test.
Perhaps that's because that same week he found out about the pregnancy, he had already begun to see Nikki. Chris says he was caught off guard by the pregnancy because while they were trying to have another baby, it had taken a very long time for Shanann to get pregnant with Bella and Celeste. He said the pregnancy made him feel even more guilty because he had just previously decided to have a more serious relationship with Nikki. At the time, they planned to have another child.
That's what he decided. That's what he chose. And then sit there and blame Shanann for it. It's like blaming God for your bad day. Look at the silver lining. Try to have a better day. Like, you are the one that makes your day great. And he's like, oh, Shanann was this, Shanann was that, Shanann was that. Like, come on.
He had no idea that he would meet someone that would sweep him completely off his feet and make him regret that he ever even had a family. He felt he was not ready for this baby because mentally he was now with Nikki. When Shanann and the girls left for North Carolina, Chris was free to do whatever he wanted, and he wanted Nikki. Their relationship escalated fast, and Chris says as much as he tried to take things slow, Nikki was pulling him. Christopher said he was very caught off guard.
Oh, but I thought Nichol was the one that was off and Chris was the one that was head over heels and stuff. And Nichol was the one that was, oh, I didn't want to get into it too hard.
Because he had never had a woman pursue him before. He says she lured him with lewd sex and sent nude pictures of herself on his personal phone. Nick was definitely chasing him, even though she knew he was married and had 2 daughters. I suppose in fairness, she was told by Christopher that he and Shanann had both decided to separate, but as much as Nicole Kessinger would say that she did not know that Shanann was pregnant, it's impossible for me to believe that, because she spent a lot of time looking up Shanann on Facebook and on the internet in general.
Guess what, girls? Mommy has a baby in her belly. Are you guys excited? Yeah. Yes? Are you really excited? Oh my goodness. Come give me a hug. Oh. I love you, girls.
I got the baby a hug.
You want to give the baby a hug? I love you, Bella.
Shanann had many YouTube and Facebook videos that Nikki most likely saw because she Googled for Shanann's Facebook specifically. And as we've already covered, Shanann's Facebook account was very public. Nikki said she did not have Facebook or any other social media, but you wouldn't need to have Facebook to see any of Shanann's Facebook posts. One of the things Chris admits to in this book is that really bad things went on in Nikki's house. Things he is very ashamed of. Some of the things Christopher says he will take to the grave with him. And I have to say, I am so intrigued by this. That is such an out of left field thing to say. I mean, is it not? Really bad things happened at Nikki's house. Things that he's very ashamed of. So ashamed of that apparently he will take it to his grave, even though releasing some of that would actually be the best thing for him to do. And the first thing I thought about when I read this was about some searches that were found on Nicole Kessinger's phone on the evening before that last date they went on August 11th of 2018. Taken directly out of Detective Michael Prill's discovery. On August 11th of 2018 at 9:30 a.m., Detective Prill wrote, in anticipation for her evening with Watts, Kessinger spent 45 minutes searching Google on topics like, quote, how to prepare for anal sex, unquote, and, quote, the anal sex guide, unquote. This progressed to searches at Pornhub for interracial porn videos and, quote, threesomes with double penetration, unquote. Yeah. He also makes a note that this was by no means the only time she had sought out pornographic videos on the internet. Now, obviously, do what you want to do, right? But I find it very interesting that she searched those types of things. And also, Chris talks about,
But she's a good girl.
very dark things happening at her house. And she searched for those things on the morning before she went on a date with Chris, where they ended up at her house. So we're going to get more into this because threesomes with double penetration, to me, says one girl, two guys, right? So
Chris
who
and
would have
Jim.
been the other guy? Many people say it was Jim. But like I said, we'll get into that. That's not what we're doing in this video, but I am aware of it, and yes, I will get to it. And so she seemed to be into porn. She seemed to be into sex, all different kinds. She seemed to be, have a very colorful
She had her own sex therapist.
sex life, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I do find it intriguing. I would like to know what, I mean, I don't need all the details, but did a threesome occur? What occurred there? What is so dark that he will not even like confess in order to get it out so that he can put it behind him? I don't know. Okay. Chris appears to have left for that date on August 11th, a little bit after 7 p.m. We do know that they went to the Lazy Dog to eat because Shanann found out how much he spent that night, and that caused an argument. And then Chris returns home that evening about 3 hours and 20 minutes later.
I still think it's interesting that Kessinger was searching Chris, Shanann, but also Rodney. And why she was also Googling the house.
Just after Chris left Nicole's house that evening at 10:04 p.m., Detective Prill notes this search. Having concluded her evening tryst with Watts, Kessinger searched the internet on topics like chriswatts, shanannwatts, ronniewatts, and 2825 Saratoga. Now, in my opinion, this is the search that I think is where Nikki found out that Shanann was pregnant with the son that she told Chris she wanted to have with him. Of course, that is entirely speculation. If I could fill in the blanks with my opinion, it would be that Chris and Nikki probably had a conversation about how Nikki needed to refrain from looking up Shanann because it would just cause fights between Nikki and Chris. But after that date, whatever happened on it, Nikki couldn't help herself. Again, that's speculation. But I'm also wondering if that 111-minute phone conversation that took place the night before Chris murdered his entire family contained a conversation about that. According to Chris, one of the things that phone conversation did contain was phone sex. But no matter what, it seemed that Nikki stalked Shanann, possibly even in person. Baby. I mean, who knows? But I think it is fair to say that Nichol Kessinger knew who Shanann was. She knew the woman she was up against. Meanwhile, Shanann had no clue that she was in a competition for her own husband. Christopher was drawn to Nikki. He enjoyed being with her. She cared about how he felt about things. She cared about what he thought and would ask his opinion, which is something that he was not used to. And what Chris needed the most, it wasn't the sex for the most part that pulled him in. He was much more in love with the way Nichol treated him and made him feel like a man again. Nichol Kessinger validated Chris Watts' masculinity and gave him the feeling that she adored and looked up to him. She valued what he had to say. He felt respect from her, and he did not want to let that go. At all costs, he determined to hang on to someone that caused him to feel like he had never felt before. It is quite possible, and it is my opinion, that Nikki knew exactly how to play Chris, and she played him like a grand piano. But at the end of the day, Christopher felt like he had a voice with Nichol Kessinger, one that he did not have with Shanann. He described being afraid to be himself around Shanann, and he never offered his opinion, nor was he ever asked how he felt about anything. He made a comment that he couldn't even hang anything on the wall in their house without Shanann getting mad about it. And it's very possible that Shanann had always been that way. But when Nikki came into the picture, Chris says that the control and the bossiness seemed to have led him where he couldn't even talk to Shanann about things that were vital to their marriage. Christopher says he had never even considered having an affair or that there was anything wrong with his marriage until he met Nikki. He wasn't looking for an affair, but Nikki was too much for him to resist. Nikki appeared to have pulled out every stop to seduce
Still doesn't constitute murder
and intoxicate Chris. He spent almost all of his time with Nikki the entire month of July. He practically lived at her house. He had almost zero time to think about what he was even doing. He says that when he was with Nikki, he didn't even think about his family, as though he didn't even have a family. When he did think about them, he felt very guilty. Nikki knew this, and it's the reason Christopher, in his own words, had to, quote, talk her down off the ledge, unquote, more than once. Nichol Kessinger made herself the victim in this situation instead of seeing it for what it was. And the final kicker she pulled was telling Chris that she wanted to give him his first son. She knew she could get Christopher to feel bad for her by telling him that they didn't have any firsts together, which actually wasn't true because she shared his first affair with him. But it would appear that Nikki felt that Shanann was ruining her life.
and the first butt stuff.
Not the other way around. Shanann became the other woman in Nikki's mind. According to Chris, after Nichol said she wanted to give him his first son, that is when the idea to take the lives of his family began. He says he didn't want to, but he knew it was going to happen, and he did nothing to fight those feelings. Nikki had a group of friends that Chris says were involved in some very dark things. He says he can pinpoint a time that he could feel himself get darker on the inside. On August 5th of 2018, when Christopher was visiting his family in North Carolina, he had already started to plan what he was going to do to his family when he got back to Colorado. In an effort to make Shanann look bad, he told his family that if he ended up dead, they should have the authorities look at Shanann. His sister Jamie told him to put that in writing, and he wrote a letter stating such, and this is that letter.
He wrote this 7 days before the murders happened.
If you've been keeping up with the case, then you know that Shanann did not get along with Chris's mom, Cindy, nor his sister, Jamie. The contention started before Chris and Shanann were even married, while they were planning their wedding. What we have learned about Shanann's personality is that she comes across as a type A personality. Very organized, very ambitious, maybe a bit controlling. My opinion on that is that if you're in a relationship with someone who relinquishes all of their control, you really don't have a choice but to step up and be the one that controls things. Shanann wanted Chris to step up and be a man, but she never really was able to let go enough to allow it. And Chris will even admit he should have put his foot down and told her, look, I don't like the way you're treating me. I feel ignored. I feel emasculated. I feel unappreciated. But he was never able to say those things. Therefore, the dynamic couldn't change. And Shanann had no idea the gravity that dynamic ended up having. Chris wanted things to change, but he never expressed it. Partially because until Nikki, he didn't even realize his true feelings about the way Shanann was treating him. That whatever dynamic
He Googled when is it okay to say I love you.
they had in place was working. His family would say that they felt that Shanann was very controlling and that she would treat him disrespectfully, and that's part of why they didn't really get along with her. But I mean, from Chris's perspective, it would appear that the family dynamic was comfortable. Shanann would handle everything. He would go to work. He would take care of the girls. He would go on these trips with her that she earned from Lavelle.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, I'm not so sure that he was super unhappy, but
I can tell you right now, I take care of the majority of stuff in the house. And it would be nice that somebody else take care of it. So, just saying.
when he met Nichol and started telling her some of these things, it would appear that Nikki was the one who pointed out, wait a minute,
It's Shannon's fault.
what? She controls all the money? She tells you what to do, and meanwhile she's ignoring you and blowing you off, you know? So
Manipulating
I
him.
really do feel that while Chris may have had his own feelings about certain things in regards to their relationship that he would have liked to be different, at the same time, I don't think he was at his breaking point with any of it.
No.
I don't think he was consciously aware. It is my opinion that Nichol Kessinger not only helped Chris to realize he had issues with Shanann, but also helped him to build resentment towards Shanann. Nikki pointed out every fault
She knew what she
within
was
Chris
doing.
and Shanann's relationship, while simultaneously showing Chris what she could offer him if he chose to be with her. Nikki learned all about Chris and what he wanted out of
Sounds good.
life, as well as what he felt was missing in his relationship with Shanann, and she made sure to cover all the bases. The fact that Shanann didn't even know Chris was having all of these negative feelings about their relationship,
'Cause he
coupled
didn't
with the
communicate.
fact that she didn't know she had a runner-up who was actively training for her role as Chris's new woman, was even more devastating. Shanann didn't even have a chance. The more she called Chris out, the more he resented her, and it was easy for him to build resentment, thanks to Nikki and all of her input, as well as her seduction. Nichol did a fantastic job convincing Detective Kobach that the relationship between her and Chris was laid back and not super serious. According to her, she and Chris were just feeling each other out, and at the end of the day, Nikki could have just
Oh, I bet they were filling each other up a lot.
walked away from this relationship at any point that Chris told her that he wanted to fix his marriage. She seems to have even convinced herself of this. She believed her own bullshit, and this is where educational purposes time may be helpful, because I have the opinion, and I truly believe, that Nichol Kessinger is a pathological liar. We hear that
Agreed.
term a lot, but what does it really mean?
Nichol Kessinger.
The Wikipedia definition of pathological lying,
Look, Nichol Kessinger's name's right down there.
also known as mythomania and pseudologia fantastica, Latin for fantastic pseudology, is a chronic behavior characterized by the habitual or compulsive tendency to lie. It involves a pervasive pattern of intentionally making false statements with the aim of deceiving others, sometimes without a clear or apparent reason. Individuals who engage in pathological lying often claim to be unaware of the motivations behind their lies.
Oh, she's
Curtis
aware.
and Hart defined a, quote, persistent, pervasive, and often compulsive pattern of excessive lying behavior that leads to clinically significant impairment or functioning in social, occupational, or other areas, causes marked distress, and poses a risk to the self and others, as well as occurring for longer than 6 months. Psych Central had some information about some mental health conditions that may be associated with patterns of pathological lying. These include antisocial personality disorder, where a person may tend to lie for status, resources, or sympathy; borderline personality disorder, which a person may tend to lie to avoid rejection or abandonment; factitious order or Munchausen syndrome, as well as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a person may lie to appear sick or to have someone in their care appear sick; and narcissistic personality disorder, which a person may tend to lie to get something out of someone else, to preserve a false sense of self, to get out of trouble, or to bolster others' perceptions
All I'm hearing right now is NK is each and every single one of these.
of them. Now, I'm not a professional, and I wouldn't even attempt to try to diagnose someone with any disorders. I'm just reading what I find. Also, according to Psych Central, you may be talking with a pathological liar if you notice extensive and unrequested details, colorful, fantastical, dramatic narratives, repeated changes to the story, signs of anxiety while talking, defensiveness when confronted, dodging questions or providing vague answers. Your recollection of events is different from theirs, such as feeling gaslit. They talk the talk but don't walk the walk. They retell a story that happened to you and pass it off as their own, which we saw a lot in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, of Amber Heard taking the story from her assistant and passing it off as her own while on stand, as if it happened between she and Johnny. Yes, I also covered that trial, so that's way back in my stuff, in case you're interested. And the last thing is, your gut instinct tells you that something's off with their stories. If you have a pattern of pathological lying, you may lie indiscriminately about a wide range of topics, tell untruths about minor events, feel undeterred by the fear of getting caught, experience a rush when you get away with lying, and continue to lie, even when confronted with the truth. I think at some point in time, we have all met someone who we could consider to be a pathological liar. It's those people that seem to lie about everything, even things that don't matter, where it's like, did you use the last of the coffee creamer? And the person's like, no, but they did use the last of the coffee creamer, and you know you're not crazy because there's only 2 of you and you didn't use it. And it's like, why would you lie about that? Like, just say.
That needle would have went all over the place with Nichol Kessinger. That woman is one of the biggest pathological liars ever.
Yes, and we'll go get more. Like, why would you lie about that? I've had experience.
Again, I'm not a professional, but I'm just saying.
With people like that. And I feel like if someone can lie about the small things, then they're probably lying about bigger things. And that's kind of like my cue of, I don't trust you, right? Amen. Okay, let's move on. Because it was also stated in this article that 13% of people admit to being pathological liars, which I actually found to be kind of funny because based on the definition, wouldn't most pathological liars lie and say that they're not pathological liars? I mean, who would want to admit that?
Yeah, no kidding.
Especially when you really don't have a lot of control over your lies. They just kind of spill out of your mouth. So I'm pretty sure that the percentage of pathological liars wandering the streets is a lot higher than just 13%. I'm not entirely sure that Nichol Kessinger fits every description, but I don't think she has to. I mean, she's been caught in many of her lies because there's evidence that contradicts much of what she says during her interviews. But again, please remember, I'm not a psychologist, nor am I a psychiatrist or a professional in anything mental health related. This is just my opinion based on what I see,
and I agree with that opinion,
and what I do know from experience.
Who else does it? Raise your hands in the comments.
Let's keep going with the book. I want to reiterate that the purpose of me adding the contents of this book into this series is because I wanted you guys to know Chris Watts' side of the story, the one that he did not tell investigators. The story that comes straight from the horse's mouth, that horse being Christopher Watts. Several stories were highlighted in the media about Shanann and Christopher's family problems and financial problems. There are also many channels on YouTube out there that discuss shanannwatts in detail. The way that she was with her kids, the way that she was with Christopher. People have a lot to say about many of the home videos and the live streams that Shanann did with her kids. They point out some pretty disturbing things. I did go down that rabbit hole as well, and we will get into some of those things later on in a different part. I just want people to be aware that I am aware of some of these allegations out there about Shanann Watts.
I am aware
like I said at the beginning of this series, we do not victim blame. Shanann Watts was a mother. She was pregnant. She did not deserve what happened to her. Period. That being said, There is a community of people who believe that Chris Watts told the truth in his first confession, that Shanann was the one who killed the girls. And there is a reason that those people have that opinion. So if you see in the comment section people sharing that opinion, I just want to make everybody aware that there's a reason that those individuals have that opinion. And it's because of these channels. But again, that's a whole video in itself, one that I will create later on in this series. But it is known that Christopher's family still believes that very first confession as well, that Chris is protecting Shanann's
The confession, he lied. Like, we know he lied.
Name because he feels so much guilt about the affair and possibly driving her to her breaking point. That none of this would have happened had he not had an affair with Nichol Kessinger. I do think it's important that we dig a little bit into Shanann's relationship with Chris's family, specifically Cindy and Jamie. Again, this is from Chris's perspective. Okay, so I told you that Shanann had issues with Chris's mother and sister. In this book, Chris explains how that came to be. Again, keep in mind throughout this video that everything I'm saying...
Again, I think nobody was going to be perfect for Chris in her eyes. Nobody was going to fulfill Christopher's relation, love, or whatever have you besides his mother.
Is from this book, which also came from Chris's mother, who also spoke with Sherilyn Cadle in the creation of this book. When Shanann and Christopher got engaged, they had an engagement party. During the planning of that party, Chris's sister Jamie offered to help. Shanann had a list of things that she wanted done, and Jamie offered to help with the invitations for the engagement party. Her job was to address and mail out the invitations. However, on the day of the engagement party, most of the friends that Shanann had invited didn't come. And the next day, Shanann made some phone calls and found out her friends never even got the invitations. So Jamie was accused of never mailing them out. Jamie says that she sent them. This is one of the first things that created a rift between Shanann and Chris's family. Shanann had also asked Jamie to be a bridesmaid in her wedding and for Jamie's daughter to be a flower girl. The week before the wedding, Shanann made an appointment for all of the girls in the wedding party to have their nails done at a spa, and Jamie did not attend. It was said that because of Jamie's work hours, she was unable to meet them at the spa. But after that, Shanann told Jamie that she and her daughter were not going to be in the wedding. Yet the dresses had already been purchased, the money to be in the wedding had already been spent, so because of this, Cindy, Ronnie, Jamie, and the rest of the Watts family did not attend the wedding. Cindy does say, however, that they have always regretted not going to the wedding. Christopher has said that he forgave his parents, but it did deeply hurt him and Shanann that they chose not to come. Another thing that came out...
It just sounds like, man, I don't want to go because I wasn't included. Like, come on, grow the hell up and go to your son's wedding. Jesus criminy.
Was an incident that happened very shortly before the murders while Shanann and the girls were visiting in North Carolina. You may have heard of it. It was an ice cream debacle that Cindy Watts calls Nutgate, where Cindy had been blamed by Shanann for trying to kill Celeste. According to Cindy and Jamie, Shanann was at their home during her 5-week visit, and this happened on a weekend that Shanann was at the Watts house during this 5-week visit. The only people who were there were Cindy, Shanann, Ronnie, and all the grandkids. Jamie said she had dropped her kids off on her way to work, so she said she wasn't there when the ice cream came out. Yet, the story Shanann told was Jamie was not only there, but that she came into the house and put out a bowl of tree nuts in front of the kids. Cindy and Jamie said this did not happen. Ronnie, who was also there, said he was very caught off guard with how this argument escalated. The story Shanann's mother had told is not exactly the way Cindy and Jamie tell it. So allegedly what happened, according to Cindy Watts, was that the oldest granddaughter, Jamie's daughter, who was 11 years old, went into the kitchen and got ice cream from the freezer, which Cindy said was one of the small vanilla cups. They had to be careful about the ice cream because of the factory that it was made in, because 2-year-old Celeste was allergic to tree nuts, which are almonds, pistachios, pecans, walnuts. It was not a peanut allergy. Peanuts grow in the ground, so that is not one of the nuts that she was allergic to. Christopher said that the allergic reactions that Celeste had from tree nuts were rashes and breathing problems, and they were also told that each reaction can get worse over time. With Celeste already having asthma, I'm pretty sure Shanann was afraid of her having a bad reaction where she would end up having severe trouble breathing. Any mother would be careful about any allergy that her child has, especially one that is so severe that a doctor recommends that she carry around an EpiPen. But anyway, that granddaughter went to the freezer, took out an ice cream cup. She sat next to Celeste and was eating the ice cream and was not made to move while eating it, as Shanann felt she should have been. It was also said that Celeste, seeing her older cousin eating this ice cream, wanted some and couldn't have it and began throwing a fit, to where Cindy told Celeste, "You can't always get what you want," in a very condescending manner. Now, this comes from Shanann, but Shanann felt it extremely
like Miss Cindy can't get what she wants?
Out of pocket to say to a 2-year-old who all she wants is to have what her older cousin is having. Telling her you don't always get what you want in a condescending manner is not exactly the right way to handle it. And that's what Shanann felt. Christopher said he doesn't think Cindy ever really believed that Celeste had an allergy to nuts. And Cindy said she didn't even know that her granddaughter had gotten the ice cream out. So how could she have stopped this entire thing? Here's a Facebook post of what Celeste's reaction rash looks like, which, to be honest with you, that alone would be enough for me as a mom to be extremely careful and maybe even a bit paranoid when sending my child anywhere that she could potentially have this happen to her. But the argument that ensued after this incident was quite severe. It was almost like the last straw for Shanann. And if it all happened the way that Shanann says that it did, and because Cindy
and Chris did nothing about it,
really didn't believe that Celeste had this allergy, as Christopher also has said, then I can't blame her for cutting ties at that point. Did she overreact? I don't know. That's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. It's all about your opinion. But regardless, Shanann had many experiences between Cindy and Jamie throughout the years that seemed to almost appear as though they were purposely pushing her buttons. That's just my opinion, though, and again, we will get into more of Nutgate and some of the other allegations that have been made in a different video. I'm really trying to stay focused on Nicole Kessinger, but it's very hard to not at least explain where some of these things came from. I obviously need to give perspective to those that don't know everything, and I hope I'm able to do that. I hope I'm doing that. I hope I'm not just confusing the shit out of everybody. Anyway, the last time the Watts family ever saw their grandchildren was that time, and even Chris felt the wrath of that argument. He was placed smack dab in the middle, and he wasn't even there. Shanann sent text messages to Chris about the incident where you can just feel her emotion and her anger. The way she talks is almost like, I've had it. This was the last straw. Enough is enough. When you start messing with my kid's life, you've crossed the line. While Shanann was compiling a text message to Christopher for what would seem the entire night that would explain her side of things.
See, looking at this too,
this was the last straw. Enough. While Shanann,
I will do everything in my power to teach her right and to protect her. Would this come from a mother that murdered her children? No.
Was compiling a text message to Christopher for what would seem the entire night that would explain her side of things and the way she was feeling. Chris was busy receiving nude photos of Nikki and storing them into his calculator app. You can see where his head was as plain as day.
He didn't care.
Within this discovery. Also, around the same time, whatever conversation that Chris and Nikki were having, it inspired her to begin to search for wedding dresses. At 3:36 a.m., Shanann finally sent a very lengthy text message to Chris, which read, quote, "Truth came out last night. I didn't create no dagger between you and your dad. That was done by your mom, and your dad and I won't change a thing. My daughter's life is way more important, and you better believe I wanted to say a whole lot more than I did. but I was being the bigger person and protecting Bella. I didn't tell your dad not to come to the party. I didn't tell him not to text or call your daughter on her birthday. I didn't tell him to start acting like he only has 2 grandkids instead of 4. I didn't block your family on Facebook. He did. Myself and your kids have nothing to say to them. They do. They owe your kids their life. Your parents' home isn't a safe zone. Your mom isn't safe. You can let them tell you what you want, but I didn't tell anyone to stop loving your kids or to stop acting like it. He did that, not me. You can believe I created this dagger, but I didn't do that. I stood up for our kids. I advocated and protected our children. I don't ever want to hear, quote, "I'm sorry I killed your kid because I was stupid," unquote. That would kill me. These kids are my world, and I have to protect them from the evil of the world. I shouldn't have to protect them from evil family. Our kids deserve the same love and attention that the other kids get, nothing less. I'm not accepting
And unfortunately, family and friends can be evil.
I'm sorry from your mom because she doesn't mean it, and I knew exactly what she was doing. I made it very clear not to eat it around Celeste because she doesn't understand, way before that happened. She is evil and willing to risk your daughter's life just to get under my skin. You and your dad are no different if you are okay with her behavior. There's nothing wrong with me, and I'm not crazy. I just love my kids way too much. From the day I left, you never said I missed you before I said it. Something changed when I left. You may be happier alone, and that's fine. You can be alone. This pregnancy, you have failed to acknowledge it or to acknowledge how I'm feeling. The first trimester is the scariest and most dangerous, yet we can lose this baby at any point till delivery. I'm not going to be treated this way for having the balls to protect our family and kids. I should get a gold fucking medal for handling it the way that I did, because I had a lot of choice words I wanted to say to her and your dad for his stupidity. No one stands up to your mom and your dad for that. He's just as guilty by not doing anything. I have nothing to do with him stopping sharing memories of his grandkids. What does that have to do with me? They are fucking with our kids' feelings, and I'm not okay with that. I am their mother, and I will protect them. I have enough to worry about with the world out there. I'm not going to worry about family. I'll just remove it. It is possible, in my opinion, that this text message helped Shanann be able to possibly sleep for a few hours, but she added to it again at 5:13 a.m. with, quote, "I also don't control what you do. If you want to hang out with your parents today, by all means, do so, but without us. Don't put it on me why you can't go. You are your own person," unquote. At 7:26 a.m., Chris replies to Shanann, quote, "These kids mean the world to me and always will. Yes, my mom truly screwed up in a huge way. More than a huge way. I don't know what I would have done if something happened to Cece. These kiddos are the light of my life, and seeing their sweet, incredible smiles and playfulness makes me smile every day. I'm sorry for the way I've been acting. It's just been in my head, and I haven't been right at all. It's just been in my head." He's trying to say that the argument is what's messing with him. This text exchange continues sporadically throughout the rest of August 4th. Chris eventually stops responding, and Shanann appears to give up too because there's no more correspondence between them for the rest of the day. But around 2:10 in the afternoon, Nikki searched Google both for Chris and Shanann's Facebook accounts. In my opinion, she's probably trying to see if they're posting anything together that would show that they're happy together. That's just my opinion, and you won't convince me otherwise when it comes to Nichol Kessinger. She never had any hopes that they would rekindle anything, and she made damn sure she wasn't going to give them a chance for that to happen, no matter what she told Detective Kovac. Chris said that he took all of this Nutgate situation very seriously, and Shanann realized that she needed to fix this breach between her and her in-laws because in her mind, she could see it really eating away at Chris. Though Shanann had no way of knowing that while that whole incident was just another tick on Chris's reasons list for why he wanted out of their marriage, it was not the main thing on his mind and really had nothing to do with his behavior. Shanann felt that may have been why Chris was so distant with her when he came out to North Carolina, and she was determined to fix it. She shared through text messages with her friend that maybe she had gone too far this time, and Chris was just sick and tired of having her pit him against his family. Christopher knew that his parents weren't perfect, but he didn't like the demands that Shanann put on him to not see his family or to not allow his kids.
That's not what she said. She's like, you can go see your family, but you're not going to be doing it with us. Like, she didn't suppress him to do that. And that's what these other YouTube channels are doing, is painting this picture that Shanann didn't let him do nothing. Shanann was terrible at this, terrible at that. Like, she wasn't suppressing him at all. I mean, yeah, okay, she did things in her own way, but he was not the man that stood up and said, hey, I don't like this, or I don't like that. Let's fix this, let's tweak this. No, instead, I'm going to murder my whole family.
To see his grandparents. He was not okay with what Shanann had done to him in making him shut his parents out of their lives. He said she had flat out told him he could not call or see his parents again. This was not the first time that Shanann had told him that, but now Chris was already 1 foot out of the relationship and 1 foot closer to telling Shanann that he was done with her. Family was extremely important to Christopher, and all he ever really wanted was for things to be good between.
And I always say, when you marry into your new life, whatever, yes, you can visit your parents, you can talk to them and stuff like that, but you're committed to your new family. You have kids for a reason. You have your spouse. You have traditions. You have all this stuff. Like, you're supposed to be all about your spouse and your kids. Like, your parents, you can bring them in, but you're about your family now.
Shanann and his family, and he didn't see any reason that it couldn't be that way. Christopher said he knew from the beginning that Shanann did not really care for his mother and his sister, and that they did not care for her. And he blames himself for allowing it to go on for as long as it did. He says he should have confronted it, but he never did. He always sided with Shanann because he knew if he didn't, there would be trouble. Even still, to this day, the Watts family deals with people who hate them for the crime that their son committed.
I don't hate them. I just don't like that they keep bashing Shanann.
The Watts believe that their daughter-in-law had just killed their granddaughters because at that time, all of the information they had was what Christopher had told them, which was that he killed Shanann because he caught her killing the girls. That is what Christopher told his father, and that is what Christopher told investigators.
Lies.
What many people don't realize is that that confession was the last time that Ronnie saw his son or even talked to him until the day before sentencing. And when they saw him that day, the only thing that Chris would tell them is that he was pleading guilty for a reason. Going into the sentencing of Christopher Watts, his family still had no idea what exactly happened. They were still going off that first confession. Just as Shanann's parents knew that she wasn't capable of hurting her girls, the Watts family questioned how Christopher could be capable of this. Since he had never shown any signs of violence, he adored his girls. They were his life. We know that the Watts family did not attend the funeral for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. Many of us speculated why that was, but it was said that Ronnie made a phone call to one of the family members and was told that it might be best if they didn't go. They were told that the media was everywhere, and if they came down, most definitely they would have been attacked by the media. It wasn't told to Ronnie in a malicious way, just kind of in a way to watch out, watch your back. If you come down here, it's a media circus and they're probably going to be making things difficult for you. So they said they didn't want to make a scene or make it harder on anyone, so they made the decision to stay away. But they did have a service of their own with friends and family, which they say was very beautiful, yet very sad. All I can say is that the whole thing is unfortunate, especially that they didn't attend the funeral. Both of these families were completely torn apart by this tragedy, and it's unfortunate that when they should have been supporting each other and giving each other strength, this tragedy only further pushed them in separate directions. The author of this book said that some of the things that have been said about Shanann are very cruel. They're very filled with hate. And Christopher agreed with Sherilyn Cadle that he did not want those things written about Shanann because she does not deserve it. Now we're going to get into Chris's side of the finances, because we do know that was another issue that very well was listed as a motive. Again, this is all from Chris, and we do not have Shanann's side of this particular story, so just remember that.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to leave it there for part 3 of her part 2, just because I don't want to leave these too long, because people have lives. People need to enjoy their time and so forth at home and not be watching Zowoki all the time. But with that being said, comment your guys' thoughts down below. So far, this woman knows how to make a crime, true crime, deep dive. She does a very fantastic job. I could continue watching this, which we're going to, but not at this time. I would definitely highly suggest you guys go over to her channel, watch her other stuff that she's got on there. Again, like I said, I'm hoping I get that email back that she would like to collab. I definitely would love to pick her brain about this and talk crime about this. So who knows what the future holds. Again, I thank you guys for watching. Please take care, be safe. As always, keep nerding on, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.